Before we turn it over to our fantastic presenter today, on behalf of the Nebraska Department of Education, School Safety and Security Team, and the University of Nebraska Public Policy Center, we want to thank you for being with us today. But more importantly, we truly do appreciate all that you are doing to keep kids, coworkers, and school communities safe and secure. This is such an important topic, as we are reminded that behind only accidents, suicide is the second leading cause of death in Nebraska for youth ages 10 to 19. For those of you who I haven't met in person yet, I am Kim Jacobson, the suicide prevention lead with the Nebraska School Safety and Security Team. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Ann Moss Rogers, who will serve as today's presenter. Ann Moss is a motivational, mental health, and TEDx speaker, author, suicide prevention trainer, and suicide loss survivor. Ann Moss uses her own personal experience of loss to help teach and support others. Now, as an expert on emotional wellness, suicide prevention, and postvention, as well as youth mental health, she speaks at conferences, universities, schools, and workplaces to better equip her audiences, fill their hearts with hope, and ultimately save lives. Welcome, Ann Moss Rogers.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you all being here today. And I would love, and I've started everyone this way, I would love for you to put in the chat where you're from, and it'll be attached to your name because I'll look through it later. I love a lively chat, so please have at it. Because it's emotional content, I wanted to make you aware of 988 and the crisis text line 741-741. And the first picture I wanted to share with you is my son Charles at the age of 3, and I made this costume. He wanted to be a shark. Tell me that's not adorable. And then there he is in 5th grade graduation. He decided he wanted a white tuxedo. Well, there weren't a lot of white tuxedos for his size. So I ordered one on eBay, and a little creative sewing got it close enough to be a white tuxedo. He loved that tuxedo. He wore it even in high school where it barely fit. And it was so hilarious in all kinds of videos. And this is him on homecoming court his sophomore year. He was the funniest and most popular kid in school. He lived with depression, anxiety, a sleep disorder called delayed sleep phase syndrome. And unfortunately, he became addicted to heroin and he killed himself in 2015. Now, Charles is the last person I would have expected would have killed himself. Later on, I would look back and I would recognize certain traits that, were indicative of kids who died by suicide. So I'm going to share his traits first, and later on, I'm going to share you the official traits. So some of his were trouble sleeping, and that's the delayed sleep phase syndrome. He was a frequent flyer to the doctor and the school nurse. So Charles caught everything. If the flu was going around, Charles got it. He also would go to the nurse with, and this started in kindergarten on through high school. He would go to the nurse with backaches and headaches, and a lot of those were the result of his anxiety and depression. He was easily distracted, and he did have ADHD. He had a sugar addiction as a younger child. I remember looking under his bed one day, and I was shocked at the number of candy wrappers he had under his bed. He had trouble being prepared. Like when class would start, he was the one shuffling through his stuff and could never find it. And then he would get anxious about not being prepared. And he always had to have play dates. And I would find out later that he wanted play dates because he was afraid of what he would do to himself, but also another reason, he never could be satiated. It was always like never enough. I mean, if the party went an hour, it needed to go 2 or 3 hours. And so it always left me feeling like I didn't do enough. He was very empathetic and he had a deep need to connect. Somebody might call that a clingy child, but I wouldn't have described him as clingy. He was loving and he gave great hugs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mental health. This is what we're sort of conditioned to look for, right? The sad kid. And I'd say a certain percentage of the time, maybe 25% of the time, this is what you might see if a child is struggling with some kind of depression. But this is what we often see instead, the angry, irritable child, the one who acts out because they're suffering and they're hurting and they don't know how to express it. Children who isolate often are struggling with depression or could be at risk for thoughts of suicide. And then this is what I saw, wore the mask of a clown. It never looked really obvious that my son was struggling. And later on, this is what I would see. He wore the mask of a clown because he didn't want anyone to know he felt depressed. But one thing about elementary school is they're more open to revealing themselves than they are later on. And that can be an advantage for us. So we're going to take a look at early signs of potential suicide risk. And there's going to be kind of a lot of lists and stuff in this part. And then we are going to dig into some fun stuff. So bear with me. So here's some early childhood traits that Dr. Miriam Mendel shared with me. She said clinginess, excessive need for reassurance, fearful expressions. I hadn't heard that one before. Avoidance, unyielding refusal to comply, tantrum if the child feels pressure to do something that causes anxiety, irritability and moodiness, inattention, trouble sleeping, and change in appetite. Here are things that heighten risk for suicide: ADHD and impulsivity. And those are the ones I'm really going to focus a lot on today, because those are two traits we can actually do something about to help those kids develop more tolerant, be more tolerant, and not act too quickly on their emotions. Kids who are on the spectrum, autism, and then kids who have been exposed to, are the result of fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. Here's some coping styles associated with higher risk for suicide and mental health problems: poor problem-solving skills, low frustration tolerance, tendency to give up easily, poor stress management, and struggles with self-esteem. Their health history and environment, 3 ACEs include suicide risk, being an adopted or a foster kid, and a family history or losses to suicide, especially to the suicide behavior of others as well. So talking about suicide, even in elementary school, never raises the risk, but being exposed to one in one's family or school environment does. So we're going to look at just a few suicide risk and protective factors. The ones on the left are the risk factors, and really not, but so much we could do about that: poor and toxic relationships, mental health, stress and trauma, family history of suicide, trauma, or substance use disorder. So protective factors that balance out those risk factors would be connection and belonging, emotional wellness, and providing a safe and sound environment. So being a place where those kids can talk. And those protective factors are something we have a little bit more control over. Kids who are vulnerable to experiencing mental health issues, often the key times are transitions and mini transitions, and due to a relationship disruption. So back to school, elementary school start, transition to middle school, and holidays, it's when you're going to see a lot of the sort of dysregulated behavior. relationship disruption, fights with a friend, sibling, parent divorce, or grief and loss. So in Las Vegas at the American Association of Suicidology, in one of my sessions where I presented, someone came up to me afterwards and she told me that her niece had died by suicide and she was 8 years old. And I want you to know that it's the earliest is 5. It's really rare in elementary school. However, this is when we can spot risks and change the trajectory if they're showing signs. So I didn't really know where to put this, but I wanted to make you aware of it. Since there are a lot of what we call under the radar drugs that are now edibles, we're seeing a lot of kids come into school having seizures, being sort of out of it as a result of getting into usually their parents' marijuana gummy bears. And these are shroom gummy bears, and they're not psilocybin, but they are Amanita muscaria, which is actually legal shrooms, which causes LSD-like effects. So a lot of the kids are, they see them and they think they're candy and they're eating them and they're going to school. And of course, that's causing some mental health issues. So does anybody have any questions thus far? If so, you can put things in the Q&A and I will circle back around. So what do they draw, say, or do? This is the juicy part. So this is a picture a young lady drew on a folder. She was in elementary school. I think she was in 5th grade, and 4th grade. And she drew that, and she on purpose put it in the trash can next to the teacher's desk. And that was because she knew that the teacher kept that trash can empty, but emptied it after every day, because she had asked that the teacher had asked that student to empty it after class before, made it her job occasionally. So yes, Cassandra has a question. Let me view that question. I tell you what, Kim, if you could notify me of that question when I get to a break, that would be great, because I can't find it. So anyway, she drew this picture, she put it in the trash can, and the teacher fished it out of the trash can. And she was immediately alarmed because it showed a picture of her sort of drowning herself. And so the teacher turned it into the school counselor right away, because you can't wait on this kind of thing. And the school counselor got with the child and asked her about the picture. And she said that her parents were going to be gone that night and she had planned to kill herself. And they were able to intervene and prevent that child from dying by suicide. Here is a picture a child wrote in elementary school. And you'll notice that he drew himself far away from the family. And I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a script on how to address that in a few minutes. What do you notice about this picture? Do you see anything in the faces of the children that stand out to you? If so, put it in the chat. No face. Right, exactly. So how might we ask or initiate conversation about this child's artwork? Audrey, this is a really interesting picture. Tell me why the one boy has no face. So we want to ask with curiosity, not accusation. You want them just to tell you about the picture and what their issue is and why they drew it. And then you ask more questions. and we will get to a conversation so you can see how that conversation could flow. So a child's overall artwork, if it changes dramatically or suddenly, like if they're always doing army pictures, then that's what the kid always draws, right? But if they've always done sunflowers and all of a sudden they're sort of drawing violent images, that might be something you want to stop and have a conversation about. If a child tends to use mostly red and black ink, that could be important. It might not be important, but it might be worth asking. And if a child draws strange versions of themselves or their family, such as leaving certain family members out or sketching themselves far away from the group, like you saw earlier. The younger one might say, I want to be with grandma. And this is assuming that grandma has died. I want to run out in front of a car. I am ugly. I have no friends. I hate myself. And I wanted to put this in there too. And this one's hard to read, but this is from a second grade teacher, because I think it's really important to realize that it's not just our students that might struggle, but also our educators, especially in the last few years, because it's been pretty difficult. So this second grade teacher reached out to me, and I didn't know her really well, but she said that she was going through divorce and she could hardly look in the mirror anymore, and she had lost her sense of purpose. All clues to me that her struggle was real. And so I asked her the question, are you thinking of suicide? And she said that she was, but she didn't think she would do it. And I said, well, let's just make sure. So I worked with her on finding a therapist in her area that took her insurance and also met on Saturdays. Not sure I could find that now, but we were able to find it. And she's doing really well now. And when I showed her that note and told her I wanted to put it in the book, anonymously, she was like, I can't even remember feeling like that. That was so long ago. So just to let you know that however you feel now can change in the future. So we need to be aware of our coworkers as well. So behavior. People isolate. Sudden behavior changes either way, from all of a sudden really happy to all of a sudden really sad or really angry. Behaving recklessly, falling asleep in class, frequent flyers to the clinic, angry, irritable, or violent, bullies other kids, sad, and frequent absences. So while people talk a lot about kids who are being bullied die by suicide, which is true, that is usually a contributing factor. Usually bullies, the kids doing the bullies, are actually at higher risk. What we want to do is we want to stop suicide with our ears. And what I mean by that is meeting people where they are and listening, allowing kids to feel heard. They don't have a lot of control or a lot of people listening to them, especially the little kids.
So
And
Emma,
allowing them, yes. Mm-hmm.
a question that would be related to what you're talking about that's in the Q&A right now
Yes,
is,
thank you.
are the students that mention hurting themselves more likely to actually do something, or one who doesn't mention it?
Actually, both are at risk, but if they mention it, they are not at less risk. That they're telling us and we need to act on it. So a lot of people think we need to dismiss somebody that talks about it. Therefore, if they talk about it, then they're not serious about it. And that's not true. But often we have kids who aren't talking about it at all, and that show different signs, and they can be at risk. But definitely if a child is saying they want to die, we tend to dismiss it because we can't fathom that a child that age would actually want to kill themselves. But usually intent starts about the age of 8. And typically that age group is going to attempt suicide or die by suicide as a result of like a fight with a parent or a fight with a friend. That's typically the biggest contributing factor or the factor that really pushes them towards suicide if they were already vulnerable. Thank you, Kim, because it's hard to find it all. So I wanted to show you the importance of listening. And this comment's actually from a high school student. However, I think it really illustrates how important listening is. My socials teacher saved my life. And as happy and as grateful as I am to him, all he did was show me he cared for me for probably less than an hour. And that is what saved my life. How can my life be so disposable that if it went the other way, I probably would have been dead? All I needed was one person to make me feel like they actually care and there is hope for me. But it wasn't my friends, my family, it was my high school socials teacher. I need a minute. This child reached out to me with the grisliest suicide plan with a friend of hers. So that she had like a pact with another child. This one conversation, this one teacher listening to her changed her completely. And they're putting out those invitations. And what we need to see when they make those comments is they are invitations trying to bring us in and say, I need help. I need you to listen. So we're going to do a little script practice so that you kind of know how a conversation might go with an elementary age kid. So we're going to do a case study. Sebastian is 7 years old. What's happening in his life? And this is what we might know, and we might not know anything else. The parents are having marital issues, and he's very sensitive. He's been withdrawn. He gets angry and frustrated quickly. He's made remarks indicating low self-esteem. Sebastian, I've noticed you seem very sad. Do you want to talk about it? Nobody likes me. Tell me why you think that. And notice we're not saying, oh, everybody likes you or anything like that. We're wanting to know why he thinks that. We want to validate how he feels. Tell me why you think that. I'm so ugly and stupid. I'm so sorry you feel so badly about yourself. What do you think about when you're sad? I think about being with grandma in heaven. I see. So are you thinking about making yourself dead? Yes, I would hold my breath until I was dead. You must feel really bad. Do you know what happens when someone dies? They go to heaven where it's very beautiful. When somebody dies, their heart stops beating. They stop breathing and they can't move again. Have you ever seen a dead animal? I saw a dead cat in our road. It was all smushed. I've seen that too. It sometimes makes me sad to see a dead animal. What about you? Me too. What are the people, pets, or things that are important to you? Now you're sort of anchoring into the conversation, getting them to tell you about what their reasons for living might be without saying, what are your reasons for living? My dog. When I'm sad, he cuddles up against me. Oh, I bet that feels really good. If you died, what would happen to him? I don't know. I think my daddy would take care of him. I see. Do you think your dog would miss you? I think so. He loves me. I know he does. Thank you for talking with me and being really honest. So we want to ask with younger children, are you thinking of making yourself dead? And with older children who might have a concept of understanding, are you thinking of killing yourself? So there is that figuring out what that child's concept of death is. It a mature one, or are they still sort of in cartoon world where you kill somebody and they come back to life? Because a lot of them just don't realize that it's final and they never come back. So we need to explore that mature concept of death. And here are just some prompts to think about that. What does it mean to be alive? How can you tell if something is alive? Is this doll alive? What do you think it means if you're dead? Can people die? Could you die? What do you think causes a person to die? When a person is dead, can they hear sounds? Can they talk? Do you know someone who has died? I think one of the most beautiful ways to celebrate death is to do this Dia de los Muertos. And it is November 1st this year in 2024. And a lot of school teachers or schools do Dia de los Muertos, and they get to bring in a picture of their loved one. And it's more festive and fun. It doesn't talk about death in a real dour way, but is more positive, and it's just a really beautiful way to sort of educate and celebrate someone's life, and to help them understand that grief is okay, and it's okay to remember the people we have lost. And that idea from Lee Lysco, she's a Spanish teacher at Kansas Public Schools. Here are the resources again. I'm going to put them in because some of you came in a little later. So a lot of the scripts you're seeing and a lot of anything resources, they're going to be in that email, probably way too much. So any questions at this point? All right, Kim will come on and alert me if I miss anything, but we will have time again. So mental health skills and interventions. So I love this quote from Jennifer Hamilton, who's a school psychologist at Nobles and Greenough in Massachusetts. In order to achieve, you have to put wellness first. And number one, if you remember nothing else today, it's building connection and belonging, doing icebreakers, working together, games and activities. Even if you show a funny video and they all laugh together, that's creating connection. School is one of the few places we have left for creating that community and connection. And it is the most valuable asset we have. Number two, we want to build coping skills and embed those SEL strategies we've learned into everyday teaching to inspire critical thinking and to have students ask questions. Want to plant some seeds and have them kind of think about it. And finally, we want to promote talking and seeking help as a sign of strength. And we want to start that as early as possible because we don't want people keeping things inside or stigmatizing the subject even further. We do that by listening and building relationships and expressing appreciation when they talk to you. So what one skill serves as the foundation of all mental health strategies? Most people usually say mindfulness, but in order to be mindful, you first have to take a pause. This is a really key skill to teach our kids because that's where the impulse control comes in. So your kids with impulse control issues and with ADHD are going to struggle with this, and they'll need more practice. And we need to start this really, really early because we don't want them to act on their anger, but instead to take that deep breath and take that pause. I usually illustrate this with, let me see if I can find that, with a sparkle jar, or what is it? A snow globe. Thank you. Oh, forgot. And I have a short video on YouTube, and I'm going to share that in the chat. And it is a 10-second video. I'm not going to play it today, but it's a very quick video, and it helps kids understand that you have to wait for those little particles to drop down to the bottom and wait for everything to settle before you act. Because if you act when your mind is in this emotional tsunami, you're probably not, you're going to hurt somebody else, you might ruin your reputation, you're going to be somebody's going to do something they're sorry about. And Jennifer Hamilton, the person I quoted a lot in the book I wrote, that Kim and I wrote, has one of these on her desk. And I love to do this as an activity. So in the email resources, you can keep the jar as it is on your desk, or just a snow globe you bought, or you can do it as an activity for the kids and explain why they're doing it while they're making their jars. So kids, they are learning these mindfulness skills in classrooms, but this one's really popular with the elementary age kids because you can kind of do your finger like this, and creating that visual really kind of helps them understand that. It also gives you kind of a poster to put on the wall, so you can kind of demonstrate, and point to it. And again, the pause, the pause, the pause. This is a game called Guacamole. And if you have like technology in your room, this is one that builds inhibitory control, which helps with impulse control. And it is evidence-based, and it's created by New York University's CREATE Lab. So here's some thoughts on building inhibitory control. The snow globe activity, breathing techniques. I'm going to tell you about throwing sound, which is so much fun. Red light, green light, the Guacamole app, musical chairs, Simon Says, red light, green light, and freeze dance. Don't have to play it all day, but doing that for 5 minutes or so teaches kids that skill. Throwing sound is a really good mindfulness activity, especially when you have active boys in the classroom. So a lot of people will come in and they'll teach mindfulness. They want everybody to sit down and calm down. Well, you've got a lot of really active kids that are not loving that. So one way to kind of get them engaged in a mindfulness activity is this throwing sound. I've tried to find a good video, and I included one in the email, but it's not terrific because it's not showing the act of it. But I love to play this in high schools, elementary school. So you make a sound, woo, 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 and you throw that sound to somebody. They repeat the sound, and then they make up their own sound. And when they make up their own sound, they throw the new sound to somebody else. What I love about this is they just start dying laughing because they're screwing up and the sounds are so silly, and it's always a lot of fun. And again, it keeps kids in the present, and that's one of my favorites. So I'm going to share a video on voluntary attention, because our goal is to increase students' attention control, because there are a lot of distractions out there. This might be getting a little sciencey, but I thought I would give it a go. I'm working with Dr. Jasmine Vasilova at VCU, and I don't work with him as often because my contact is Jasmine, but Hamed Akhtari, I wanted to be able to give him credit as well. So I'm going to share a 2-minute video with you that kind of explains voluntary attention and what it is.
When we try to find something in the supermarket, we know what we're looking for, so we can direct our attention properly to find it. This is what we call voluntary or goal-driven attention. There are different types of voluntary attention. For example, focused attention, sustained attention, selective attention, divided attention. We need focused attention to hunt for important information. It acts like a spotlight that moves around our environment and lights up the most important parts. We need sustained attention to stay focused on things for a longer period. We need selective attention to stay focused on one relevant thing while ignoring others. We need divided attention to focus on more than one thing at a time and be a multitasker. But we also have another type of attention, which is called involuntary or stimulus-driven attention. Let's see what they are and what they mean to us in real life. There's so much information in our environment, our brains can't process it all at once. Information about sights, smells, sounds, textures, tastes, all compete with each other to capture our attention. But we have a limited capacity to process this huge amount of information. So our brains have instead developed ways to filter this information and allow us to focus only on a few things at a time. This brain function is attention. Sometimes we can direct this attention towards what we expect and what we need to complete our activities and achieve our goals. So the wheels of attention are under our control. For example, imagine you're on a diet. Your voluntary attention helps you to search for vegetables while walking down the grocery aisle. But at this moment, you might also lose control and your attention becomes tightly locked to a creamy hot donut. This is how our involuntary attention is captured by salient stimuli. There are useful strategies and practices to help you balance these two forms of attention and improve your attentional control. We will introduce some of them in the practice step. Click Next to play advanced levels of the Hidden Objects game.
So a hidden objects game is one way to kind of help kids control their focus, because that stimulus-driven attention is what steals their focus and creates some impulsivity. So what hijacks your voluntary attention is the external capture of attention by salient stimuli can hinder task completion. So basically a donut can, instead of getting the broccoli, you get the donut is basically what that says. And what we want kids to do is take that pause and stop so they make the better and more informed choice. Not that they're not going to pick the donut all the time, but we want to start to build those skills. And we can with some of these games. I was at this conference and my friend Julie Goldstein Grummett from Zero Suicide suggested this good behavior game, and it's evidence-based and reinforces inhibition by rewarding positive behaviors. Now, it's not just a single sit-down game, but it's kind of like, I guess if you're my age, it was kind of, you got a gold star. So it's a little bit like that, but it's reinforcing that positive behavior. So it's kind of an overall program for an entire semester, to kind of reward good behavior. But it's got a lot of evidence behind it. And so I included it. I've also got a lot of mindfulness activities and fun games in this ebook that you'll get in your resources. I think another really important aspect is teaching kids to feel their feelings and not avoid them. When we avoid, we miss the opportunity to grow and learn. And, it's not like it goes away. And when we avoid, later on, we go to self-harm and numbing and doing things and that can drive thoughts of suicide. So I think really adults need that too, but teaching kids to feel their feelings and understanding that all feelings are temporary. And they, the really intense, painful ones last about 60 to 90 seconds. All right, I see something in the Q&A and I think that I've got it now. Let's see if I can, that's the chat, or nope, that was the chat. Sorry about that. The other is the feelings bracelet. So Wendy Turner is a second grade teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And what she does is when kids come into class, they put a bracelet on. I'm having a great day. Caution, it could go either way. And I am not having a good day at all. And they can go back and change their bracelet at any time of the day. And she actually illustrated this one time when somebody kept interrupting her class. And as they kept interrupting, she got angry and they left the third time and she was really, really mad. And she told the students, she was like, oh, you got to give me a minute. And she went to the corner and she started doing some deep breathing. And then she came back when she kind of brought her emotions down. So she she modeled that for the kids and then came back in front of the kids like, what just happened there? You were so mad. So then but one of the things she did is she went and ripped off her green one and put a red one on before she went in the corner to do her deep breathing to show everyone that emotions change and you can go and get a new bracelet at any time. But that's kind of an external reminder of how people can, I can see your emotion because we can't always see it. Sheila McElwee does something called the mental health check-in. A lot of you may have seen this idea already. But on Mondays, what she does is she asks kids to say how they're feeling on a scale of 1 to 5. And then after a while, she said they'll start saying why they picked number 2 or number 1. And then kids will connect with one another because, oh, your cat died. Well, mine did too, and that hurts a lot. And they start to support each other, even in elementary school. So the recap is we want to teach the pause. And one way we do that is the snow globes. Allow kids to feel heard, group activities for connection, identifying emotions, which you probably do a lot of, and games to build inhibitory and impulse control. So we got some resources to share, and one of them is the Ask Suicide Screening tool. And you can use this tool as early as 8 years old. And I'm pretty sure, I hope I did. In the packet, I've got all the tools that you can use from high school, but there's also a gap monitoring tool for elementary age kids. So that was the missing piece, is there wasn't anything to monitor kids who might already be showing signs and you want to kind of keep track of them. And so that's from Dr. Poland, Dr. Singer, and Dr. Urbacher. And so I pulled it from their book and made a nice, neat list and links to all those resources. So this, as you can see, it says, in the past few weeks, have you wished you were dead? In the past few weeks, have you felt that your family would be better off if you were dead? In the past week, have you been having thoughts about killing yourself? Have you ever tried to kill yourself? So you can always replace the kill yourself with make yourself dead. That being the only change. But they use these in pediatricians' offices. And again, it's the blanket resume, the recommendation is 10 and up, but you can use it as early as 8 years old. And that is from Dr. Lisa Horowitz, who is one of the developers of this tool. So I have a case study, and it is in that packet as download, but I'm going to tell you about it. I used to own a digital marketing company, but I was on the board of a youth mental health organization. And one of my employees came to me and she goes, let's call him Lester. And she said that Lester is showing some signs of, everybody hates me, I'm so ugly, a lot of self-deprecating remarks that were worrying her. So she brought it up to her pediatrician. Oh, he'll grow out of it. So her gut was telling her something different. And fortunately, she didn't let her brain talk her out of what she felt in her gut. And she came and asked me because she knew that I worked with a youth mental health organization, and I was the board member that dealt with all the case studies from the clinicians and the school clinicians for the younger kids. And she said, should I be worried? And she starts telling me all the things he's been saying or doing. And I'm like, early intervention works. I think you're right. I think you're onto something. And I would get him some help. So she did take him to a therapist, and they did something called filial therapy, which is kind of a parent play game. He loved it. And it really started to make a difference. But she knew this was going to be an ongoing effort because I told her, it's not just this one thing. You're going to have to stay on top of this as, new challenges come forward. And then we met for lunch. And knowing where she was in the area of Richmond, Virginia, I knew that the middle schools were way overcrowded and they didn't have special programs at the time. They do now. And I suggested that she do a private school for Lester because he just needed a smaller environment. She's like, gosh, I don't know if we can afford it. And I said, find one that you feel good about that you can't afford. They're in that county and I'll send you a list. She ended up doing that, and she reached out to me last year, and he is entering high school. And she said, it's been a lot of work, but the therapy and all that, this child is going to the high school. He has so much confidence. She said, I just feel really, really good. So he did end up going to a private school. So I want you to know that when you intervene early, it really makes a difference. And of course, many of you are going to need the parent to be agreeable to that as well. And that case study is in the packet of tools. Thank you all so much for being here today. And as funny and as talented as my son was, his greatest gift was letting other people know that they matter. And that is a legacy that I'm proud to carry forward.